Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our weekly Build Roundup series. If you don't know, this is something that we do where we take a look at DIY projects that have been sent in by our customers. They're all made with off-the-shelf electrical tubing and maker pipe connectors. We're going to use the iPad. We're going to break down the projects and highlight some different techniques and things that you can learn and apply to whatever it is that you're making. In this episode, we're going to be checking out a chicken enclosure, a boat blind, an update to a trellis that we saw a while back, a garden shade, and some hacks and modifications to a classic community build, the Kayak cart that we've seen a lot over the years. Let's jump into the builds and check them out. First up, we've got this build from Matt, and this is a really awesome hen house or chicken enclosure. You can see it looks like he's got a elevated platform on the back side of, it looks like their house. Could be, maybe that's like the actual chicken coop. That's really nice if that's the chicken coop, but pretty sure it's their house. And they've got this platform here that is elevated up in the air and basically built an enclosure for their chickens. And this is really cool, really in-depth build. We'll break it down kind of quickly here. We can see that basically the main rectangle is attached to the wall using flanges there. I'm pretty sure those are the off-the-shelf set screw flanges that you can get. And they're not really made for EMT conduit, but I think you can make them work, maybe replacing that screw, or they might just clamp down enough on them. But basically the rectangle comes out of the wall here and is attached to the wall with those flanges. And we'll kind of break this down into different steps just so we can kind of wrap our head around how this is constructed. But basically, we can see here that the rectangle goes around and is attached to the wall with the flanges there. And then in this corner, to make the rectangle, it looks like the 90-degree connector is being used there, if I'm not mistaken, to make this rectangular box shape. So that's kind of the start of the frame in order to kind of build that rectangle. And then, of course, there's going to be a ton of bracing. So it looks like there's mostly T-connectors being used to grab onto the horizontal pipe that makes up the top of the rectangle. And then those go down, and then there's T-connectors down here. So there's just bracing just to add some vertical supports every few feet within this build. And you can imagine the same thing is mirrored on the other side, and it's just a lot of T-connectors. And then I think if we look at the other picture, we can see where the design kind of changes in the front here, where we can see the rectangle, and we do have two more supports here with the T-connectors to add these verticals. But if we look closely, we can kind of see how this rectangle almost looks like it splits in half. And the way that they did that was using the 180-degree connectors here. And those are just kind of used where the horizontal pipe that makes up the main rectangle runs continuously through those connectors. And then they're just breaking up the vertical spans with the 180s there, and then that is going down, and then again there's two more flanges securing those at the bottom, and then two more 180-degree connectors directly on top of those. And again, it's the same thing where the horizontal piece is running continuously through it there. And that was just basically to add some really good reinforcement to the front of the frame here, just kind of those two vertical posts side by side. And that's really the main rectangle of the frame. Like we said, this wall over here is just the same as the other one. The roof is really unique in the fact that it's basically split up into two halves. We can see here it's not all one roof, which is really unique. We usually see people use different connectors to make a roof peak and kind of incorporate the roof all in one piece, but this is split up into two sections, and I think it's really smart to do it that way. But again, we've got another rectangle. This is a little bit different than the first rectangle that we looked at, because this is basically a two-dimensional rectangle that goes all the way around like that. And they just use T-connectors here in the corners to make the two-dimensional rectangle. If you're making a box or a three-dimensional square or rectangular build, then you want to use 90-degree connectors. But if you're doing 2 dimensions, just a flat rectangle, then you want to use the T-connectors in the corners. So then again, just kind of building that main rectangle first. And then Matt just added some cross supports using T-connectors again. We can see here's one that goes all the way across and then down. And then directly next to that is another T-connector, but instead of going from one side of the rectangle to the other, it's actually pointed straight down. And that's how that attaches to the vertical that's coming out of the 180-degree connector here that we talked about a moment ago. So that's how the roof is basically attached to the main rectangular frame. And then the same thing over here, we can see that he used a number of connectors to attach the roof. Basically, it's T connectors grabbing on to the original main horizontal piece that makes up the rectangle that we saw. And then he's using T connectors to add a short piece of conduit that goes up. And that same thing is being done all the way down there, as we can see, to secure the roof in place. And then he's using the adjustable angle connectors because this is going to have a slight angle to it. Obviously, it's a peaked roof. So there's going to be adjustable angle connectors at the top of each of these vertical posts that go down, and that is what's holding the roof on the sides here. And that's pretty much it to make this main frame. Now, there's something really unique here and cool I wanted to highlight. I guess two things, really. First of all, on the outside of the frame, he's got hardware cloth secured to the framework. I would imagine using metal zip ties, it looks like. If we look closely there, I think that's what that is. A number of different ways that you can secure it, but I think metal zip ties would be the strongest for something like this. And then using hardware cloth, or you can get different gauges of, chicken wire, different things, depending on the animals you're trying to keep out or the animals you're trying to keep in. So you can research that and figure out what you want to use for your enclosure if that's what you're making. The second thing I wanted to highlight is they make these roof panel closure strips is what they're called, where basically it's flat on the bottom and then it's ridged on top. And that's how the frame is being secured to these corrugated plastic roofing panels. Because you can see that it's basically wavy. If you've seen any of those metal panels or the plastic ones, they're wavy like that. And so these closure strips are made to kind of sit in the grooves of those panels, and then you can secure the bottom of them to the conduit. We can't see exactly how he secured the conduit to them. I think they make these out of foam, I think they make them out of wood, and I think they make them out of plastic. So depending on the material that you choose for these, you can secure that to your framework. If it's wooden ones, it'd be super simple. You could use like conduit 2-hole straps to secure those in there. But if you're using the foam ones, maybe you could cut a hole in it so the conduit runs through the foam. We can't really see exactly how Matt did that. If you're watching, I'd love to know exactly how, because I think this is a really great technique and a lot of people would find it useful for their builds. But, you can use these closure strips in that way. You just got to figure out how to secure them to the conduit frame. But that's pretty much how he made the roof, how he made this whole structure. And this is a big build, obviously, but a really fantastic one and just a really great project with a lot of good ideas in here if you're making this. And I think technically the other side of the wall is not going to be mirrored because it has a gate on the other side. But basically what you would do is just break up the wall and then make a 2-dimensional rectangle that would act as your gate that opens and closes. And then you can make hinges to open and close the gate. I'll link a video down below on different ways that you can make hinges, but that's how you could add a gate to one wall. So that's really cool. Awesome job, Matt. Really great project. Thanks so much for sharing this. Next up is this boat blind from Steven, and this is really cool. This is utilizing all just one connector to make this. Actually, technically 2 connectors, but the main frame is made with just one connector, the 135-degree connector. And that's what gives it this really cool shape. Basically, really simple. There's just 4 verticals, 1 in each corner. And at the top of those verticals is a 135-degree connector, which joins 3 pieces of conduit together. You've got the one in the bottom that we just saw, the one that comes out at the top at a 135-degree angle, and then the one that runs continuously through it, this horizontal piece that runs to the other side. And basically that's all you use, just those connectors in different places here. Here's one at the top, and again, that's 3 pieces, the one we just looked at, the horizontal piece that goes to the other side and goes into this other 135-degree, and then of course the horizontal piece that runs from front to the back, as we just saw with that first 135-degree connector. And it's pretty much that same design mirrored in all 4 corners, and it gives it a really cool shape and a really kind of a great shape if you're doing any kind of hunting in a boat. This is the shape that you're kind of going after, and so it's a really good idea to do that. And then to secure this to the boat, really simply, he used the flange from Maker Pipe, which has 4 mounting holes. You can mount this to the deck of the boat or different areas, and then of course the conduit vertical just attaches and clamps between those 2 pieces and goes up, and then that's basically the framework. Really simple. Now he's got a great framework. He can add chicken wire to this, or and then add the brush and different things on top of that, but all he's got left to do is camouflage the outer part of the frame. But now he's got a removable frame that he can disassemble pretty easily. So really cool, Steven. Thanks so much for sharing this. We love seeing it. Next up is an update to a project, and I love including these in these episodes because we first talked about this, I think a couple of months ago. I'll link the original episode down below with a timestamp so you can check that out specifically if you want to see the build, and we kind of broke down how it was put together. Here it is when we first saw it a couple months ago. But here it is now with the plants growing throughout the spring, and we've got gourds on here and tons of vines, and this is really awesome. And we can kind of see the way they designed it is working out great, where the plants are growing up the back. You can see, just like we saw with the enclosure, this is hardware cloth secured to the EMT conduit frame, and that allows the vines to climb up the back, and then they're on top, as we can see there. And in the other photos, we can see this is really working out great and is really loaded down. And we've got some gourd starting there, as we can see. I believe that's what that is growing there. It's meant to be a gourd trellis, so I would imagine so. And then just really cool to go from that to this awesome trellis. Love seeing this update. Like I said, I'll link that original timestamp down below if you want to see when we broke this down. But really awesome. Love including these updates because oftentimes we just see the frames. We don't really get to see them in action. So love seeing this. Thanks so much, Alan, for sharing this update. Next up is a great garden shade. This comes from Ben. This is really simple. It's really just 6 verticals, and I like the way that we actually can see the model that Ben made in his software. I don't know if this, it's Blender. Okay, wow. That's pretty cool to use Blender for something like this. We can kind of see the construction of the frame, and this is a really great example of how I recommend that you plan out your projects. It's a good idea to get it out of your head, whether you use a software like this, or even if you just draw this same kind of thing, just using just lines to make this same kind of thing on a piece of paper. Just getting the idea out of your head into something like this, just to kind of visualize it, is really important, because then what you can do is take a look at this, and then you can see, okay, well, I need to figure out what connector goes here. Okay, well, there's 2 pieces of pipe joining together there. What connector joins 2 pieces of conduit together in that way? Oh, that's where we can use a T connector. Oh, look, it's the same kind of connector back here. And then we need to figure out this one that joins 3 pieces together. So you can kind of break down your build that way, where you get it out of your head first onto paper, just do a simple line drawing, and then break down and figure out the connectors that you need just based on where those pipes are being joined together. And if we look, sure enough, he used T connectors down here in the corner to connect those 2 pieces together. And then the vertical in the center is being secured with the 180-degree connector. So that's really how he built the main rectangular frame. It's just T connectors down here. Let me see here. So you got T connectors down here in these 4 corners, and then 180-degree connectors in the middle. And then up here, it's a slightly different, where he's using 90-degree connectors, where he's got the vertical piece coming up and then the 2 pieces coming out of it. So it's joining 3 pieces together. And again, like I said, if you're making a 3-dimensional cube or square, you want to use the 90 in that way. So he's using 90-degree connectors in the corners on the top. And then again, in the middle, he's using 180s, the same as the ones down here in the middle. The 180s, he's using that. And that's really the main frame, where he's got the 90s in the corners. And then the rest of it is just really just bracing. Pretty easy enough. It's just the 45-degree connectors to add some bracing in the corners here, as we can see, which is always good if you're building. And looks like he's out somewhere in the west. Love seeing that Western architecture and the beige and the cream and the different, browns and reds that they do for their houses and buildings. So it doesn't really need to be a sloped roof, because there's not going to get a ton of rain or snow. So, being able to do a flat roof is really effective for something like this. But because they're in the desert and out west, going to have to shade the plants, which is why they built this in the first place. And I love how they secured the sunshade to the top of the roof. If you look closely at the top of the vertical, they've got a threaded pipe insert there with a eye hook threaded into this, and that just allows them to hook on some of these turnbuckles here, as we can see. And then the edge of the sunshade has got a grommet in it, so they can hook that to the turnbuckle. That hooks into the eye hook, and they secured that in that way in all 4 corners, and that's a really great method for securing sunshade. So really cool, Ben. Thanks so much for sharing this. A really great project. Last but not least is a really cool project from Mike. And we've seen the kayak cart. Like I said, it's a classic build from the community. We've seen this a ton over the years. And this is really cool because people often take this kit that we sell and they modify it for their needs, which is exactly what Mike did. We can go through and see the changes that he's made to this frame. Well, first of all, I'll say that I'll link Kayak or Axel's video down below where he built this kayak cart. and you can see exactly how to build the main frame, and I'll also link our kit down below if you want to check it out. Then we can go through and see the different hacks that he did. So first of all, he added threaded pipe inserts to the top horizontal piece that supports the kayak, and then we can look and see that he's using eye hooks. It's actually just the same hack that we just saw in that previous build, where it allows him to hook something onto the corner of the piece of conduit, which in this example is going to be the ratchet straps that are holding the kayak and pulling the kayak tight to the cart so they don't fall off when you go over bumps and things if you're walking down a trail to the lake or wherever you're kayaking. So that's really cool. He added those, and then we can also see here that he said he got bigger wheels. I think he got 20-inch, if I'm not mistaken, so a lot bigger wheels than the ones we used in that original build video and the ones that Axel used. And so those are cool. I like these Rubbermaid Never Flat wheels because they don't require air, and they're pretty large, as you can see there. I use these whenever I made a kayak trailer for my bike a while back. I'll link that video down below if you want to check it out as well. But these are really good wheels to use, so he swapped those in. And then he also actually did something cool, which was the axle is made with 1/2-inch empty conduit, and that's going inside of the 3/4-inch, like kind of outer axle sleeve, we'll call it. And this allows him to basically pull this pin here and slide out the 1/2-inch empty conduit, and he can take the wheels off if he needs to. That's really cool and a really effective way to do that quickly. He also added, we can see here, some hooks that he drilled into the side of the cart. And he's got some bungee with some door stops here. Love this, used to this door stop. And that acts as wheel chocks. So whenever he's loading the kayak into the water or off the truck, if he's on a steep area, doesn't have to worry about the kayak cart trying to roll away while you're trying to load the cart on top of it or take the cart off of it. So really cool. We can also see here that he added a kickstand with a T-connector, and then he's using the quick release clamp that we sell to make this connector where you can just open that lever and slide the kickstand out. He also said on the end of the kickstand he's using the telescoping clamp, which allows him to adjust the height of the kickstand by sleeving that 1/2-inch empty conduit in and out based on the terrain he's on. We can see here that he said he upgraded the pull noodles and used some really extra thick ones there to protect his kayak. And I think he said he even spaced out the wheels, so there's a little bit more of a gap than usual. I think we put the wheels right up against the pipes in the build, but he said he added a couple inches to the length to kind of space them out so they wouldn't rub against the kayak that he's using. And here we can see kind of a final shot of everything together where he's got the ratchet straps wrapped around the end there, and he said he's using some heavy-duty webbing that mountain climbers use, and I forget what those are called off the top of my head. I forget, but using those to secure the kayak in place. And just a really awesome, again, this is why we share these builds so people can remake stuff or totally make something new and incorporate different hacks like we saw the eye hook hack being used in a garden shade and the kayak cart, 2 totally different builds that utilize the same technique. So it's just really awesome to see, and we love doing this episode every week, and we hope you guys keep sharing your builds. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.